Hi, I'm Jim Ward with the Middle Country Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to Episode 4 in our History Bite series. Today we'll be discussing the burning of Washington by British soldiers during the War of 1812. The causes of the War of 1812 included British attempts to restrict U.S. trade, impressment of American sailors and forcing them to serve with the British Navy, British laws known as Orders in Council declaring blockades against American ships bound for European ports, and attacks by Native Americans on American frontiers believed to be instigated by British troops in Canada. As a result of all this, the United States declared war on Great Britain on June 18, 1812. In order to strike at Great Britain, U.S. forces almost immediately attacked Canada, which was then a British colony. During the War of 1812, the British were urged to attack the former colonies after British troops attacked Canada and burned government buildings. Washington was picked as the target because of its symbolic importance, its easy access from the sea, and the inability of inexperienced American troops to defend it. President James Madison and his wife Dolley were aware of the threat, and they made prearranged plans to escape the city if the British attacked. As British troops gathered in the distance, Dolley decided to abandon the couple's personal belongings and instead saved a full-length portrait of former President George Washington from desecration. Since the portrait was screwed to the wall, she ordered the frame to be broken and the canvas pulled out and rolled up. Two unidentified gentlemen from New York hustled it away for safekeeping. Unbeknownst to Dolley, the portrait was actually a copy of Gilbert Stuart's original. Dolley left the White House and found her husband at their predetermined meeting place in the middle of a thunderstorm. As the British drew closer, the panicked residents of Washington began to depart en masse, and clerks began whisking away important papers out of town, such as the Declaration of Independence. Finally, on August 24, 1814, after a series of disorganized maneuvers, American forces dug in outside of Bladensburg, Maryland, a crossroads town 6 miles northeast of the capital. Borrowing a pair of pistols from his Treasury Secretary, Madison rode out to witness the battle, as did most of his cabinet. In fact, the president nearly galloped right into the British lines until a scout stopped him and directed him to safety. The British forced American troops to retreat and continued on to Washington. The British arrived in Washington on August 24, 1814, and in retaliation for the American attack on the city of York in Ontario, Canada, in June of 1812, the British began their revenge on Washington. They first stopped at the still uncompleted Capitol, where they piled up furniture in both the House and Senate wings, mixed in rocket powder, and applied the torch. Within minutes, flames were shooting out through the windows and roof, damaging not only the congressional chambers, but also the Library of Congress and the Supreme Court, which were located inside. Next, about 150 men marched down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House, then better known as the President's House. Upon consuming food and wine that had been set out for 40 people, they stole some souvenirs, like Madison's medicine chest, and started a new inferno that left the structure a charred mess. The adjacent Treasury building was also burned, although much to their disappointment, the British found no money inside. The glow from the fires could be seen as far away as Baltimore. More destruction occurred the following day when the British torched what remained of the Washington Navy Yard and the Treasury Building, along with the brick home of the State, War, and Navy departments. It could have been a lot worse. Rear Admiral Sir George Cockburn, who accompanied Major General Robert Rawson to the Capitol, reportedly wanted to burn the entire city in retaliation for American depredations in Canada, but it was an army operation, and it was Ross's call, and he would have none of it. However, the victory in Washington was short-lived. On September 11, 1814, at the Battle of Plattsburgh on Lake Champlain in New York, the American Navy soundly defeated the British fleet. And on September 13, 1814, Baltimore's Fort McHenry withstood 25 hours of bombardment by the British Navy. The following morning, the fort's soldiers hoisted an enormous American flag, a sight that inspired Francis Scott Key to write a poem he titled the Star-Spangled Banner. Peace talks were already underway at Ghent, which is located today in modern Belgium, and Britain moved for an armistice after the failure of the assault on Baltimore. In the negotiations that followed, the United States gave up its demands to end impressment, while Britain promised to leave Canada's borders unchanged and abandon efforts to create a Native American state in the Northwest. On December 24, 1814, commissioners signed the Treaty of Ghent, which would be ratified the following February. On January 8, 1815, unaware that peace had been concluded, British forces mounted a major attack in the Battle of New Orleans, only to meet with defeat at the hands of future U.S. President Andrew Jackson's army. News of the battle boosted sagging U.S. morale and left Americans with the taste of victory, despite the fact that the country had achieved none of its pre-war objectives. I'd like to thank you all for joining me today, and if you enjoyed this video, hit like, and if you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe. Thanks, and I'll see you all next time.